An example of best practices for use of learning objectives within a course to guide student learning. So learning objectives are something we should all have. You might have them at the presentation level. You should have them definitely at the course level. We have them at the whole program level. And so they're a way of helping students be aware of what they're supposed to know and what they're supposed to be able to do by the end of this lesson or the end of this course. And it is something we use to guide everything we do. That's how we write our assessment questions. That's how we create our assignments. Everything we do should be geared around those learning objectives. And we should always be able to demonstrate how everything that happens in the course leads us towards one or more learning objectives. Students like to have the learning objectives because it helps them understand if they are meeting the requirements of the course, and it guides them as they prepare for exams and things like that. What depth are they supposed to know the information, for example? If you want a review of how to write learning objectives, that can be found on the Educational Support website on the Collegiate Intranet, and here's where you find it there, and you can certainly contact us if you're having trouble finding that information. And the students brought to me an example of a great use of learning objectives within a lesson to help drive what they were doing in that lesson and in the course. And I asked Dr. Davis Seelig for permission to share it with you, and he gave me that permission, so thank you to Dr. Seelig. So this is sort of how it works for him in his clinical pathology course. So, step one. Good learning objectives. Here they are. This is what's going to happen in this lesson today. The student, by the completion of this lesson, will be able to define and properly use the terminology of bone marrow analysis. You can read the rest of them for yourself. So these are the things we are going to talk about today and what I expect them to be able to do by the time they've worked through this material, either by the end of this lesson or by the end of this lesson and any subsequent assignments or outside work. Note that these provide a scaffold for students, starting with terminology, moving through sample collection, then summarizing it, then predicting it. This moves right up Bloom's taxonomy, just beautifully. Bloom's taxonomy, remember, starts out with, this is stuff I can remember. Then it moves into, this is stuff that I can use. Then it moves into, this is stuff I can evaluate and predict. So this is beautifully building from that foundational terminology piece. Then we're going to figure out how you get the samples. Then we're going to identify what's in the samples. Then we're going to be able to look ahead and say, here's what I think is happening because of those samples. So not only were those well-written objectives because it was clear what the students needed to do, it's also well-written from the standpoint of understanding student learning as they move through the content. Step two, add explanations to the learning objectives that tell them why it's relevant. And these are what are called the AKAs. So, for example, if you look at the second one, explain the indications for bone marrow sampling, the AKA would be, why do I collect bone marrow from a patient? Why do I care? What am I going to do for it? And the students find those very, very useful. AKA, why do I need to know this information? How am I going to use whatever I am learning and doing in this class? And as I said, they find these AKA questions to make the whole thing very approachable, very relevant. They really, really like those statements that help them understand why they need to know this and how they're going to use it. Step three, as you're going through the lecture, refer back to them. And this is the thing that the student said was most powerful to them. So they will see what they're supposed to be doing in the class, then they'll work through some things, then they have a minute to do something active, and then afterward Dr. Seelig would say, okay, now referring back to our list of learning objectives, here's where we are now. And so you talk them through very specifically how they are working through the objectives together as a class, and you give them an opportunity to clarify things that are unclear to them so they know they've really hit that learning objective. And then finally, when you get ready to do assessments, make sure they match what you covered in that presentation. So for example, if all you got through in the class, all you talked about in the class was how you collect that sample and basically how you read a report, it might be really inappropriate to ask super high level questions about interpretation of that report, like questions about artifacts and how they're impacting what you're seeing, or I don't know, something that is just beyond what you covered. You want your assessments along with everything else to align with those learning objectives so that the students know that they learned it in class, and then when they get to the assessment, they've already been through an assessment, if you will, by formative work done in the class that allows them then to take that summative assessment and know how to be successful in answering those questions. Again, I want to thank Dr. Seelig for letting us share this information. And if you have any questions, please contact the CVM Education Support Group at cvmces@umn.edu.